Sa puso't isip laging kukupkupin mga gunitang sa atin nakarating. Bayan bukawin sa diwa't damdamin, pangarap ng kahapon ating tuparin. Marami pang bagay ang dapat tutunin, mga aral na nakalipas susulatin. Malayong kahapon sisikapin pang libutin, nalalaman atin pang pauunlarin. Talam sa kaibig-ibig mong layunin, padayon sa iyong pagiging tinig ng kahapong nagnanais na marinig, ng ngayon at ng bukas na darating. Luwid ka mananalaysay sa iyong papel, turuan mga kababayan na daigdig, agam-agam sa sarili, dangal papag-alapin, gabayan, bayan ng kabutihay, landasin. Mula simulan hanggang mabuli, hilig sa nakaraan payabuhin, at kung parating anumang lupain, may pagtatanggol sarili ng may lalim. Talam sa kaibig-ibig mong layunin, padayon sa iyong pagiging tinig ng kahapong nagnanais na marinig, ng ngayon at ng bukas na darating. Luwid ka mananalaysay sa iyong papel, turuan mga kababayan na daigdig, agam-agam sa sarili, dangal mapag-alapin, gabayan, bayan ng kabutihay, landasin. Mabuhay ka, kapisanan, kasaysayan, Pilipinas.
Mabuhay, kapisanan, kasaysayan, Pilipinas. Ako ba hinaririnig ninyo? Ako po si Xiao Chu, isang public historian. Welcome to Vibal Group, Kasaysayan, Kaysaya. Sorry po, wala yung mga papalakpak natin. Wala yung mga papalakpak. Sapagkat ako po ay na-stranded dito sa National Museum of Anthropology. Dahil ngayon po umuulan. John Ray Ramos, kumusta ka? Napakinggan ba yung rendition ko ng Pangarap ng Kahapon ni Ryan Cayabyab at ni Ian Alfonso? No? Revised lyrics siya ni Ian. Ano? Pero yan, napagandang kanta ng Philippine Historical Association. Thank you, January, for watching. At tulad na nasabi ko, na-stranded ako dito. Kaya pinapasalamatan ko Director General Jeremy Barnes for allowing me to broadcast from the lobby of the National Museum of Anthropology. No? Kasi wala talaga ako masakyan. Kanina pa akong 4:15 na nagbubook ng Grab. So thank you po. Siyempre po, si Ma'am Ann Rosette Cralencia ng National Museum of Anthropology. Gayon din si Lisa Kiplon sa tulong na makapagpaalam po. At siyempre, nandito rin si ate guard natin, Maria Fe Tampico. Ayun. So mamaya, papanood nyo ito sa inyong mga anak, ano? At sa inyong mga kamag-anak. At napakabait po nila na pinagbigyan po ako mag-broadcast mula dito sa National Museum of Anthropology. Bakit nga po ako nandito? Actually, galing ako sa Butuan City kanina. Diretso lang po ako dito. Diretso. At meron pong nagkaroon dito ng exhibit na tinatawag na Heritage Churches ng Cagayan River Basin, Cagayan Valley. So, may book po yung exhibit na yon na sinulat ni Javier Galban, the director of the Instituto Cervantes. Heritage Churches of the Cagayan River Basin. Ayan. Autograph na ho niya ito. Autograph niya yan. Ha? At meron pong introduction by one of our great church historians and architect at mga churches ng Pilipinas, ang expertise niya, si Dr. Ricky Regalado Trota Jose. Ricky Jose. Yan, may autograph na rin niya. At sino bang nag-publish? Sino po ang nag-publish ng librong ito? Part po siya ng 50 Shades of Philippine Art na pinablish ng, nakita niyo ba yan? Ha? Vibal Group! Kita niyo, Vibal Group! Vibal! Kita niyo? Salamat, Vibal! At meron na naman tayong bagong libro tungkol sa ating kultura. Minamapa ang mga simbahan ng Cagayan. Nakakaingit ang Cagayan. Ang dami-dami pa nilang magagandang simbahan. Oh, na noong panahon pa ng Espanyol. Sa ibang probinsya po, tulad sa amin sa Tarlac, wala na po bago na halos. At yung mga heritage churches, may nasunog po, kamiling, hindi pa rin na itatayo yan. Sana ho, matulungan natin, maitayo ulit yan kung balak pa ho nilang ipatayo. Sapagkat nandun ay ruins eh. Oo. Anyway, nandyan na po yan. Nagpapasalamat tayo kay Sir Gaspar Vibal, Rio Brihino Lim, no? Si Ma'am Christine Mandigma, siyempre nakita natin kanina, nandito po siya kanina. Rio Brihino Lim, nakita po natin kanina, siyempre. Love na love natin yan, ano? Kasama na rin siyempre, si Sandra Thea Omar. Sandra Thea Omar. Ayan, no? Thank you, Sandra, for being with us, no? Okay, so binabati ko rin pala yung mga galing sa Butuan, galing ang Butuan, di ba? Binabati ko yung mga scholars ng Filipino Patriot Scholars of the DOST-SEI. Kinukuha po nila akong speaker, kahit science po sila, sa history, para po mag-instill ng love of country at appreciation sa Filipino science ng ating mga ninuno, no? Sa ating mga kababayang scholars ng DOST. So thank you po, no, kay Joseph Bio, sa lahat ng bumubuo niyan, kay Graciel Sasot, no? At sa lahat-lahat po ng bumubuo, no, ng Robbie Reyes, syempre, nandiyan na lahat, no, si Ida, no, thank you sa inyong laging pagkuha sa akin bilang speaker. Alright? Batiin lang natin yung mga early birders natin. Ano? Teka lang, sino ba itong mga nagme-message? How much yung book? 700 pesos yung launching price kanina. Pag-usap tayo mamaya, January. Mag-usap tayo, ha? Sige. Quencel Villano Ortega, no? Thank you. Jasmine Enviado, Glench Casa, no? Batangas State University, Carlos Sanchez, Mark Edison Lamsen, Irish Ibet, no? Marilyn Fernandez, Danica Lozano Aycoires, Marilyn Fernandez, Mary Rose Miranda, Anthony Erano Perol, Cherry Aklan Cabael, Rachel May Toralba, Jean Magtibay Ramos, no? Daming taga Batangas State, ha? Thank you for watching po. Kayo ba ay ni-require ng iyong teacher, Raquel Lopez, Shane Lina, Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Santa Mesa Branch, Rica Atienza, from the National Engineering University. 135 viewers po tayo ngayon, ano? Ayan, Kirsten Nagbay, Catherine Pesigan, Ryan Dexter Mendoza, Russell De Mampo, Princess Diane Embryo, Fred Eric Mercado, Evelyn Mendez, Ryan Dexter Mendoza, Leanne Cabral Badillo, Krisha Lisette Manalo, Charlene Cabañas Fadrilan, Aliana Gaba, Joanna Rabimbe, Mark Lester Reyes, hello po, Danica Lozana Alcoives, Ayan M. Bucal, Catherine Paniligan, Tristan Abdala, Novi Meril de la Cruz, Jetro Magsino, naku, ang dami nito, Novi Meril de la Cruz, Mildred Perez, Erica Ferrer, Janice Cantos, April Arevalo Rayos, Mary Goldman Narin, Maxine Alia, Joanna Rabimbe, Myla Andal Espina, no? Daming from Batangas State University, National Engineering University, Pablo Borbon Campus, Patrick Abdon, dami nyo. Krisha Lizette Manalo, Daniela Camil Dagli, Aina Joy Ramos, Angelica Logto, Gito, Toby Yang, Patrick Abdon, Roselyn Endaya. Thank you. Naku, hindi ko na mababasa lahat. Ang dami po. Sobrang dami. Sa mga sinuwerte po, maraming salamat. Dan Luis, hello. Yung girlfriend ko, Noela May Orozco, sana kasama kitang kumakain ngayon, pero nandito tayo dahil walang masakyan. Oh, I love you very much. No? Noela May Orozco. Okay, thank you po. Maria Madia, watching from City College of Calamba, Jerby Muya. Sorry po yung mga hindi ko na nabati. Sobrang dami niyo po. Thank you. Hanggang 9 o'clock po yung kuryente dito, no? So, kailangan matapos po tayo before 9 o'clock. So, tatawagin ko na ho yung ating guest. Alam ko na kung bakit maraming nanonood, 145. Kasi po, maganda yung ating guest doon sa poster. Diba? Maganda yung guest, pero dito nyo makikita. Hindi lang po siya maganda, hindi lang po siya isang kabataan, kundi, alam nyo yun yung meron akong qualification nun sa isang worthy na babae. Beauty, brains, and nationalism. Ang nagsabi po sa akin yan, hindi ako nag-invento niyan. Si Ginoong Floro Kibuyan, isang historiador. Beauty, brains, and nationalism. Hindi ko na patatagalin. Ito na po, no? Akin pong tinatawagan ang atin pong guest ngayong araw na ito. Oh. Siya po ang ating hinahanap natin para mabasa natin ng maayos. No? Ito, siya po ay advocate for culture and creativity, co-founder of Tayo Change Agency, and Kids for Kids Philippines. Wala akong iba, kundi si Tasha Mañosa Tanjutco. Binibining Tanjutco, makasaysayang gabi po sa inyo.
Hello po, good evening.
Ay nako, salamat at nakasama ka namin ngayong araw na ito. At siguro ganito, no? Si Tasha nakikita ko ninyo, kabataan, pero meron nakapag-usap kami recently. We met at a function. At ito nga yung kasama mo yung mother mo at pumunta kayo sa, mamaya makikilala niyo kung sino yung nanay niya, at pumunta kayo tayo doon sa kinoconstruct pa lang na Museo del Galion. And nakita ko nga that you are interested in culture, and our topic for today is cultural mapping. Cultural mapping. Ano ba yan? What's that Pokemon? No? It's a buzzword now actually in local government. Cultural mapping, cultural mapping. Ano yung Pokemon na yan? But before we go there, tulad ng lagi natin ginagawa sa ating mga guests, tandaan natin sa Kasaysayan Kaysaya, hindi lang yung mga experts ang guests natin. Usually, meron din tayong young cultural advocate just to inspire other people. No? At in a way, expert siya dahil siya po yung nakatapos ng kanyang thesis about this. But let me tell you, no, kailangan makilala natin ano ba yung journey niya, no, sa kultura, sa pagmamapa ng kultura at paano siya naging interesado dito. But my favorite question always to know our guests is, what is your earliest recollection when you were a kid?
I think actually one of the earliest memories I have, I was actually talking to my mom kanina about this, was in my lolo's house. He had for us a playroom. We called it the jeepney room because what he did was he built half of a jeepney inside the playroom. And that was supposed to be our play space. If other kids parang had other playgrounds, they'd go to outside parks. Ours was a jeepney. So parang that was really one thing that stuck to me as a child. And I think that's why from the very beginning, Filipino culture was always parang around me and alive somehow.
You know, I ask this because when Winston Churchill began his autobiography, with the earliest recollection that he had, alam mo, I believe it also defines what you will become. Diba? So, for example, ako, birthday party na first year ko, blue cake, and kwento ko lang I was crying because they already brought me to the room. What I felt was I wanted to be with the guests. But you brought me inside the room already, so naiinis ako. So, being, flamboyant that I am, no? And trying to be friends with everyone. Yun na naging ganun ako. Although I recently, Tasha, no? I recently realized that, sorry kung naging tungkol sa akin, pero I recently realized na I am actually a functional introvert. Ayan. Are you an introvert, Tasha?
Yes, very much po.
I think functional introvert tayo pareho, no? I mean, you can socialize, you can speak.
Yeah.
Akala kasi nila extrovert tayo eh. No, but it's really still hard. But we do this because we love what we do, di ba? But anyway, you told us about your grandfather, di ba? So, my grandfather built a jeepney. Who is this grandfather of yours? Sino siya? At ano yung pagkakakilala mo sa kanya bilang isang tao? Kasi makasaysayan po ito. Sige nga po.
Yes po. So actually, what's funny is that we never called my lolo or my grandpa or lolo or the usual names. We actually called him Bob. So to us as kids, or to even us immediate family, or even titos and titas, knew him as Bob. So Bob is my lolo, but to other people, he is also known as Francisco Bobby Mañosa, who is actually a national artist for architecture. So throughout his life, I guess his philosophy really was to only design Filipino. And he has
Only design Filipino, ha?
Yes.
Yeah.
He would turn down other projects talaga if it wasn't in line with his culture. And what's exciting is that he had this quote before that he'd always say in his talks, especially because he really liked giving talks to students before. He'd always say architecture must be true to itself, its land, and its people. So parang for me, even beyond architecture, that quote really stands. And I think that's how he kind of influences even as kids to really appreciate culture. Even if, for example, a lot of us aren't really good at speaking the language, we learn to appreciate it even deeper by appreciating how we saw it in everyday life. So growing up talaga, like I mentioned in my memory, he always made sure that we were also surrounded by the environment. He always encouraged us to play outdoors, to learn about plants, to garden with him. So it is always about being outdoors, being surrounded by a really nice environment. And I think that goes well in hand with the type of culture that we have. It's very connected to our natural world, and that's kind of how I grew up around him. And within his architecture as well, he really promoted the use of native materials, looking at indigenous architecture. So I think that's why his formal title is the father of new vernacular architecture, because it's understanding the past and knowing how to also bring it forward.
My question is that your room where you are broadcasting from now?
Yes.
You have a baul.
Yes.
An old baul, di ba? Na this is, I think, made of mother of pearl.
Yes.
Right. Sobrang antigo yan, no? So let me show you. I saw this picture in the internet that defines who Mañosa is as an architect. These are supposedly the top 10 best design projects of architect Mañosa. And these are all historic buildings. You can see the Coconut Palace there. You can see the Our Lady of Peace at EDSA. The LRT stations were also made by Mañosa. And also you see there One San Miguel, the headquarters of the San Miguel Corporation. And then of course, yung cauldron of the stadium for the Southeast Asian Games. Recently, 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Pero the other ones na, hindi ko pa ma-distinguish, no? But I think dakak yata yan or what? I don't know, but yan ang mga nagawa ng iyong lolo. Oh? Aside from many other things, definitely, many other things. Architect Francisco Mañosa. Importante yun kasi the Coconut Palace, for example, is a very, I mean, of course, alam naman natin may issues because that was a project by the First Lady Imelda Morales Marcos, di ba? Pero again, you look at it in its cultural, well, you look at the dictatorship, yes, but you look at it in the cultural, its cultural worth. Then you have to balance this, no? na these works are still something that we can still be proud of. Like, of course, the Cultural Center Complex, Locsin naman yun. But nasama si Mañosa doon sa complex na yun. Ano? And, well, you told me about him, no, na bringing you outdoors and all of that. Ano ba siya? As a lolo, as a person, warm ba siya? Okay ba siyang lolo? Is he cool? What can you say?
We actually called him, parang he was like Peter Pan. He never grew up talaga. Like when we were kids, he was always our playmate actually. Like he was the one always willing to kind of do the extremes. One of our favorite memories actually was one time we went to a zoo. And this type of zoo, parang the enclosure wasn't a cage. It was just a barrier of parang plants, I think. And there was a kangaroo inside. And what he decided to do to scare us was he went inside the enclosure of the zoo. And he went behind the kangaroo, and all of us were panicking. We were screaming his name like to go out, but for him it was patawa. So he was always like that, always making us laugh talaga. Like for example, in the escalator, even when he was slowing down, getting older, and we told him to be careful, he'd like running up the opposite end. So for example, if the escalator is going down, he will walk it going up. So he was always like that. He'll just find parang moments to make us laugh. So I think that's why growing up with him, he wasn't really we never knew him as serious or saw him as like a huge figure in architecture. We really saw him as like our parang playmate, best friend. So yeah.
Wow. Now, we also were talking about your mom, and I actually met you because I met your mom in one of the functions here in Paco Park, the National Parks Development Committee, no? Mahilig din sa culture yung mama mo eh.
Yes, very
Mana-mana ito ah. So sige nga, sino ang mama mo and what is she doing?
So my mom is Bambi Mañosa. So of course, very influenced as well by my lolo's philosophy and his work. She also really, I guess growing up then, always felt like it was fantasy land for her because that's what my lolo always made it feel like, or Bob always made it feel like. And she is now currently the president in Museo Pambata. So this idea of also being surrounded by work and doing work for kids or the next generation was always around me as well growing up. And she used to run an art studio called Creative Kids. So of course, art was always there. We were her guinea pigs. So every time she'd need a new project, she'd use my sister and I. And she'd also expose us a lot talaga. Like for example, instead of making us go to school, she'd make us absent. Then we'd go to Sinulog. We would do all these crazy things, go to Sagada. She was always immersing us in all these different things and made the entire, I guess, world our classroom then. So that's why I guess I was able to really appreciate the work that she does and translate it into my own then.
Well, I have a follow-up question for that. Ano? What is the best, probably the best, I mean, at the top of your mind, ano? Because this is a very hard question, the best cultural tour that you have done with your mom and with your sister?
I think if it isn't so, I think one of my favorite or most memorable ones was going to Sagada, because what we did was our quote-unquote guide was my tito who decided to live there. And what he did was he took us to these areas that normally aren't accessible by tourists anymore. We went to all these different far-flung areas. He would point at random mountains and say, we'd hike this one today. And we would really learn from the community mismo. He'd take us really in between the town, make us go down the terraces, see really what some weavers were doing. He showed us where they'd hold rituals. So it was very immersive because the way that we went through the town was really learning from the people mismo that we'd pass by, because he knew them since he lived there. So he'd tell them, oh, sige, make kwento. So they'd make kwento about their house, whether it be what they would be cooking, what they're going to do next. So it was very interesting because it wasn't exactly a tour that you see that will present you with facts and with data and dates. It was a tour talaga that made you appreciate the culture of the people because they talked about their way of life.
Right. Now, the question is, your mother now is the director of the Museo Pambata.
Yeah, she's currently president of Museo.
President of Museo Pambata. So, yun, if you can visit Museo Pambata again, so please come. No? Now, I would like to show, before we continue, a clip of you being so cool, Saglit lang, ano? Let's see. Oh, there it is.
Oh my gosh.
Wait lang, will not put the whole thing kasi baka ma-copyright tayo. But just to show you how cool Tasha is, ito po.
Hi everyone, I'm Natasha.
And I'm Isabella.
And we want to empower young people like us to bring positive change to the world through creative ways that are rooted in Filipino culture, just like Disney's awe-inspiring royal sisters,
Anna
and Elsa.
Oh, ayan ha. So if you want to that, just watch. Ito yung video ha. Pakita natin yung video na yan para mahanap nila. Oh, ayan. Ayan. Oh. Real life queens, Tasha and Isabella Tanjutco. Oh my Disney Asia. Real life queens, Isabella and Natasha Tanjutco. Oh, di ba? Ang kusahin. Isip mag-artista, girl.
I was super shy to do that, honestly. Because, well, I grew up with Disney talaga, so it was an honor. But also, I'm an introvert, so I'm not ma-camera. So it took a lot. But my sister, Bella, actually, she's not here right now. She studies abroad. But she's really the one who's super talkative. We're exact opposites. So I think that's why it works then. She's probably like the counterpart who will keep talking.
Well, it doesn't really show that you are not talkative because you've been so expressive, but I think because you are talking about culture, really, which is a favorite subject of yours. And ano ang sagot mo hindi ka mahabang sumagot. You really answer direct to the point. So kaya nagpa-follow up questions ako para kumaba tayo. But yeah, I'm so glad that you agreed to do this. And of course, you are involved, and I want people to be inspired here because you're involved with what we call Tayo Change Agency. And is it Tayo or Tayo?
Tayo.
Tayo, hindi tayo ha. Tayo. Change Agency and yung Kids for Kids Philippines. Tell us about these two advocacies of yours.
Sure. So this might be a long kwento, but
You make it long, no problem. We have time.
Okay, so Kids for Kids actually began back in 2015. So as I mentioned, my mom used to have an art studio called Creative Kids. And in 2015, she decided to close it with an exhibit called ARAW. So it was all about Filipino games and play. And what she did was she called back all her old students and they painted all these big artworks. The ones sizes you normally see in galleries, not normally done by kids, but she gave them big canvases, very interesting pieces to paint, inspired by games. So this ended up sparking within us an idea that it was really possible to give young people a platform to do something bigger. So normally when we would think about organizations at the time, when I was still in high school together with my sister, or outreach work, it was always graded in school. So parang it wasn't really something exciting. I know a lot of kids weren't so interested in giving back just because it felt like it was something graded, something required, or you visit communities, you talk to them, but you have to leave right after. So there wasn't really that way of connecting with one another. And because we saw there was this way of making giving back exciting when we were growing up, because again, our mom brought us to all these different places. She used to actually do art therapy for abused women and girls. So she would bring us to all these different workshops that she had. And at an early age, even when we were like 3 and 4, my sister and I, when we'd have extra toys, she would actually tell us to collect it, and now we'd be giving it to other kids that needed it more. So because we got used to this routine, every so often we would just collect what we weren't using and sending it to kids that needed it more. So because this was an innate routine talaga we had all the time with her, when again she closed her art studio, we decided we wanted to continue the work that we were doing throughout our lives. For example, from the idea of giving back to the idea of using art to give back. So we merged that and we created Kids for Kids. It was a movement talaga dedicated to the idea of making giving back fun. Actually, photos din if you want me to show po.
Yeah, please do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, sige.
I just found some in the internet.
Yeah, that's from our Facebook. So we
2016.
Yeah, we started it we started it 2015. We were just 5. And then when we started our first event called Takbo. This was October 2015. It was a fun run. That's when we realized that there was this, I guess, like urge for young people to want to do more. So this is actually a photo of our event, Takbo. So it was a race to raise funds for UNICEF. What we did was normally what UNICEF does during Halloween, because they have like boxes and you go to different houses and you collect coins instead of candy for kids in need. But what we did instead, because you're like, parang it's not so exciting for the youth, diba? Because everyone when you're young, all you want to do is make friends and go out and do all these exciting things. So we combined that into one event and made it for a cause. So that's when we saw the power of young people, because just by calling our friends, making them join, we were able to raise 300,000 for UNICEF in one night. So that's when we realized there was really this, I guess, need to give young people a platform to turn their ideas into a reality, whether it be teaching kids how to play instruments, doing mural paintings. We used to work with a lot of communities that were affected by typhoons. Up until today, that's our main circle of beneficiaries, or really what we like to call them our barangay. Because one thing that we wanted to break was that wall, that invisible wall, wherein a lot of organizations see other people or people they work with as a beneficiary. But what we really want is to really show how we can all be one barangay. And I think that also goes back then to my Lola's philosophy, or the idea that you can connect with different people using culture. So whenever we do projects, we'd always make sure that it revolved around the idea of art, culture, and making people feel hope through it. So we did a lot of projects throughout the years. We'd, for example, just collect toys, and we sent around 60 balikbayan boxes during the time of Marawi, during the war. When there were opportunities to give young people.
Wait lang. Let's go back to the toys.
Yes.
You know, not so many people realize in war zones and, you know, disaster areas, that one thing that we really need, aside from food, aside from clothing, aside from housing materials, are really toys for kids. Just remember, they've lost their toys because of these things and all of that. And they actually needed psychosocial support. So one way of doing it is, you know, you have people, some would send even clowns. Then you have also these kinds of toys. For example, it's naiiyak ako, no? Parang ang laki-laking bagay for these kids. And I really thank you for doing this, no? Kasi ang daming hindi nakakaintindi nun. Parang ano bang silbi ng laruan, di ba? Pero yung laruan na yon sa isang bata na kagagaling lang sa isang masakit na pangyayari will really help a lot. Di ba? So thank you for that, Tasha. Sige, you may continue.
Yeah, so normally that's what we always put first in mind. It was, what do other people don't realize kids need at the time of need? So that kind of became our battle cry for Kids for Kids. It was always being a child for those that didn't have a childhood. So in 2015 up until 2016, we would do this type of work, whether it be we were able to go then to Tacloban. We worked with communities also up north. So we were just doing all these random projects up until 2016 then, when we started this art festival for awareness called Kamalayan. So what we did naman was, this was really, I think, a good example of merging the idea of culture and environment. So we would create upcycled artworks. We'd collect branches, plywood, anything from each other's houses, and we'd turn it into artworks that we could sell to raise funds for a certain cause. And normally these causes were directly correlated to solutions for communities that don't have art materials or immediate means to preserve or to conserve their culture. So for the first year, we worked with the Sagada Art Club. The second year, we worked with Lake Cebu School of Living Traditions. So that's when I had the honor of meeting Maria Todi, and we've worked together since then. So it's been really exciting, because even when we first visited Siargao back in 2016, we went because we realized that there were so many people going there or starting to go there because of tourism. But what would happen now to the island if all the waste came in? What would happen now to the local people? Do they have businesses? So we just wanted to learn about it and that was kind of what our organization did. We would always go out, learn about the world, and then come back and figure out solutions. So to that, our solution was habilin. We came up with a kind of congress for biodiversity, marine biodiversity amongst youth. But now it's also become a separate youth organization that we run. We create educational material um, inspired by young people. So, for example, the latest book we're working on now is the municipality of Del Carmen finished a whole scientific study on their biodiversity and their mangroves, but no one's gonna read 540 pages of scientific research. So we were able to digest it and turn it into a children's book.
Wow,
So that's
wow.
the type of work that we do at Kids for Kids. It's making sure, again, kids in mind.
I have a question. So where are these works of yours that you made for kids available? Okay, can we buy it in Shopee or what?
We haven't actually made it available yet. Normally, when we do have projects, it goes directly not to the beneficiary. But hopefully, if we get to release the 2 books that we're working on now, we want to see how we can make it available to the public eventually, or see how we can publish it. But at the moment, it's direct to the community.
All right. Oh. Tell me, because I hope I can request for a signed copy.
Okay, sure po. So yeah, that's what we do in Kids for Kids talaga. And that's, I think, what began our journey towards creating Tayo. Because we gained such a large network without us realizing it. Because the goal at the beginning wasn't to start an organization. It just slowly happened because a lot of people started believing in the message that we were talking about, which was just really advocating for culture, climate, and children's rights. And that's sort of how Tayo came to be. So we call ourselves a change agency and design studio because when we were doing projects for Kids, a lot of companies would start approaching us and ask how we got young people to listen, or how would you plan events that actually would make an impact and at the same time be interesting. So that's what we do now through our different projects. Like, for example, Tayo now works directly with different municipalities, and we're creating cultural and creative spaces. So what we realized post typhoon, because a lot of the necessary relief, of course, goes directly to the food, the shelter, the immediate needs, which our organization also does cover. And luckily, back in 2020, over the pandemic, we raised 16 million pesos for typhoon relief. So because of the excess funds we had, we started investing in long-term solutions. So now what we're doing is we are creating creative spaces in
Wow.
far-flung areas. So right now, we are doing our pilot program in Halian Island. It's an off-grid island off the coast of Siargao. It's in between Siargao and Dinagat Islands. But what we're doing is we're trying to bring a space where young people can really be creative, talk about their culture, and not have to do it inside a classroom. We wanted to expand the idea then of libraries, that they weren't just areas to read, but could also be areas for workshops, exciting things. So because this community was heavily hit by a typhoon, in fact, the cuento was of this area was that everyone thought they were dead on the island when the typhoon happened because it's so small. They're only around, I forgot how many, I think the island is less than 300 hectares. So we decided to choose this place as a beneficiary because we wanted to see how a self-sustaining island, or an island that is remote, far from access of like museums and all these institutions, could really establish their own area or center for culture. So that's what we've been doing for the past 2 years in Halian Island. There it's really tiny, super small island, but really amazing and resilient people. So we've been working with the kids. Post that we did feeding programs there as well with other partner institutions. We donated I think 250 materials worth for boats. So they were
Wow.
able to I guess jumpstart their livelihood again because they lost all their bangkas and their borotos over the typhoon. So that's we were there. I finally was able to visit last August and meet all the kids. So I designed them this shirt that they're wearing, called it says Halian on it, because they have this small library that we helped a little bit rebuild, so they have a space to hold informal classes. But hopefully, if we have enough funding, we're going to build this classroom, or what we like to
Wow.
call our creative space.
I have a
So
question. Do you,
yes,
do you partner with the National Book Development Board?
we actually I met in the opening din of the one of Kidlat Tahimek, the one of
Yeah.
book. Yes, so hopefully we can. I
Yeah.
did mention it.
I think
So
they will ano, they will give you the books if you ano. Yeah, kasi my publisher Kahel Press of St. Matthews, were Bayani biographies. Ano we were given already by NBDB to a lot of communities already. So
perfect.
baka makatulong din sila diyan. Yeah.
Yeah. So yun, this is our latest project.
Charis Ann Velasquez says, amazing. Amazing daw, sobra. Talagang natutuwa. 100 plus viewers, thank you so much. No? Sige, tuloy mo. Ang ganda naman yan. So,
Yes, it was designed actually by my three friends.
mm,
So Bea Carage, who also comes from a family of architects. Her grandfather is Kalma. So she really is also interested in this line. We were classmates also in high school. Then my other friend Bea Rodriguez, and then another friend Janelle Gan. So three of them just designed this. I told them, of course, what the community shared they wanted, and then we translated it into a design. What we did so that it's buildable is we took the normal DepEd standard classroom, and then we transformed it into how it could be made a little bit more nicer.
sassy.
Yeah.
Sassy. Yes. Hey, Carmen Gorez Romana says, go, 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 Tasha.
Thank you
Sige.
po.
Oo. Sige, tingnan natin. Ano pa? Wow.
Yeah. So
I like you put ghosts there, ano? I'm joking, of course. No, hindi sila. They're running, okay? They're having fun.
So yes, so I'm so hopefully we get to break ground by the end of the year. Because luckily for this island specifically, because it's off grid, they're not connected basically to electricity. So we
Oh,
were able to get um the CSR company of Tesla called Give Power to provide a generator for the school. So I'll be going back end of the month to hopefully install the generator for Halian. So yay.
wow.
Yeah. So there, and we work with a lot of other communities also devastated, specifically by Typhoon Odette, since that was when we raised a lot of funds. So we've been helping talaga transform spaces. So this before was Espoa School of Life, but the entire thing, the roofs all flew off during the
Yeah.
typhoon. And what we suggested, so we just helped rebuild the roof of this first one. So luckily the community really does like PAWID or NIPA. So this is now also an opportunity to use more local materials then in their schools. So that's a little bit of what we do at Kids for Kids now, and hopefully then it inspires others and other kids talaga
Wow.
to start something, because we
Look at
started
that,
this.
ano? Look at that. It looks Mañosa.
So it's really nice, no? So this is called Espoa School of Life. Medyo social the name because the one who actually sponsored it was French. He
Shala.
I think he owns boutique hotel chains around the world and decided to donate this school. And what's galing about the school is it's actually it's internationally accredited. So the kids here are being trained to really become professionals in the field of environment and science and culture for the island of Siargao mismo. So right now they're until grade 6, I think, and then eventually they'll keep adding until grade 12. And it's only for one community that they chose on the island. So those are the kids that get to visit the school. And parang during the typhoon then, what was really sad was when all the roofs of their houses flew, they all had to take shelter in this school. So it also really is a sign of hope for the kids. So
Yeah.
that's what you realize then post-typhoon, is that parang people forget that these places that are supposed to be just for kids, like schools and gyms, in the end become spaces for the whole community. So parang how do you again make these spaces safe for young people to be in once again. So hopefully that's what we can do through these projects.
Fantastic. Sabi ni Charis Ann Velasquez, it's all natural, speechless. How can a person think that? So imaginative and helpful to others. Rikat Yansa said, ang ganda po. And wow, talagang we have very, very positive feedback here from our audience here. Terry Ombaw said, sana, napapasana all sila. Sana makarating kayo sa school namin, bukid nun. But you know, wow, talaga naman. Ito talaga malayo talaga. It's isolated in a way, wala pang kuryente, no? But you're able to manage to bring these things. Thank you so much, Tasha, for that, ano? And I think obvious na doon sa ating next question, no? Obvious na pupuntahan na natin yung culture kasi mukhang talagang lumubog ka. I mean, you have to really, okay, let's be frank about this, ano. There are times na sometimes, di ba, may mga tao na, alam mo yun, yung nilalait yung mga Inglesero. Di ba, sobrang Inglesero siya, o tingnan nyo naman, di ba? Sobrang Inglesero niya, tapos sasabihin yung konyo siya, di ba? Pero, girl, tingnan nyo naman yung ginawa niya, di ba? Talagang, she went to the communities and you want it to be sustainable. Diba? Hindi lang ito parang dole out na nagbigay kayo ng... Kasi di ba ganun yung iba minsan na relief goods, tapos okay na, walang masama doon. Or it's very good, very fine, no? Pero yung merong follow-up, it's really how it's done now because you don't just want to give. You want people to have develop mindsets. You want people to develop yung kanilang thinking and hindi lang yung pagkain o pera na nagpapamigay ka ng pera o nagpapamigay ka, no? But really, making them better persons that will achieve their dreams. And you do that because you want to inspire them to learn more. That is what people are not looking at. The power of museums. Like this one, nakikita nyo yan, the National Museum of Anthropology. When people go here, and how these little kids, alam mo, gusto ko ang Tasha, no? Gusto ko ang isang project, yung magkaroon ng community din. Alam ko ginagawa ito sa Museo Pambata ng mama mo, even before that, no? Nung panahon nila, ako nakalimutan ko na yung name nila, Nina Yuson, no?
Yeah.
They have a community, they bring, you know, the out-of-school youth to the Museo Pambata. Hindi nila na-realize yun. And then of course, read book hubs, public book hubs. Well, sa Maynila kasi ang hirap kasi ninanakaw yung libro Pero kasi pag mahirap din yun kung hindi professional yung librarian, di ba? But in the provinces, this is very much needed. No? Yung community books na pinakita nga ninyo, fantastic yun. Ano? Now, when you hear feedback, before we go to culture, no? Kasi papunta na tayo doon. You're a very cultural woman, lumulubog ka sa mga kultura. But when you hear feedback from these people, what do you feel? What kind of feeling does that have? Ano yung nakakamdaman mo?
I think one of the best ways to explain it talaga, even if it's simple, is hope. Because nowadays, I think there's so many bad things happening around us. And I think one way talaga to continue actually doing things for these frontline communities that are basically also the protectors of our culture. Because in reality, when you're in Manila, like I tell a lot of people, it really isn't the Philippines sometimes. Like you don't realize how exciting our archipelago can be. So you are hopeful when you work with these communities because of how many stories they still have to tell that often aren't heard. So I think that's one of the most rewarding things is hearing their stories and having the privilege to listen to it, because not a lot of people have that platform to be able to, and they also actually don't have the avenue sometimes to get to people that and to tell their own stories. So even for example, when me and my friend Isa Barta, we were lucky enough to get grants from National Geographic early this year to do work. And normally with National Geographic, you have all these amazing photographers that take photos of the communities and tell their stories to the world. But what we both did was we reversed the the process. We actually gave the kids disposable cameras. We made them tell their own stories, and these photos actually ended up getting featured in Nat Geo Asia amongst all these big photographers. So it was kind of also a way that we really wanted to give back to the people that are the ones protecting our culture, the ones that also are I guess messengers to the rest of us to really tell us what is needed. So I think that's one of the most rewarding things, just listening and hearing to their stories, because I know they have so much to tell, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to actually interact or get to these communities. So hopefully that's a gap we can bridge.
Number one point, number one is, if you're going to look at it, sinasabi ni Tasha dito, the privilege of listening to these people. You know, these people are culture bearers, diba? Let's call it spade a spade. Laging sinasabi nila na, yung mga igorot, yung mga igorot na yan, mga walang kultura, dapat matuto sila sa ating mga taga-Maynila. Hindi siya ganun eh. It's not like that. When we put books there, it's really not to educate them, educate, right? But to really engage with them. Engage with them. And to also, kasi, you know, lahat naman tayo maganda, i-broaden yung knowledge. Hindi yan masama, di ba? Na we help them broaden their world, di ba? Their perception of the world, di ba? Pero yun na nga, minamalit natin ang mga katutubo, ang mga lumad, ang mga nasa probinsya, na mga walang kultura, di ba? Pero hindi, they're culture bearers. And for me, tatama ka dun, it is a privilege to listen to them. It is a privilege na pinapahiram nila tayo ng panahon para pakinggan ang kultura nila. And number two, nakita niyo yung ginagawa ni Tasha, Hindi naman kaya yan ng kahit na sino lang, di ba? Tasha was able to build a network. So these are people working together, and yung network ang mahalaga. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but do not be an asshole.
Yes.
I mean, do not be an asshole na akala mo people will gravitate to you because you're good. Hindi ganon. Hindi ganon. Kailangan nating mag-build ng mga connections because hindi mo alam pagdating ng panahon kung kailan mo kakailanganin yung mga connections na yon and connect them with other people so they can help each other. No? The logistics of going, for example, to Siargao is probably needed because, well-connected si Natasha. And this is where I'm also saying this, na hindi masamang maging mayaman. I mean, I'm not saying na napakayaman ni Tasha at ng pamilya niya. They're really, hardworking people. But what I'm saying here is, you cannot really give something when you do not have it. Diba? That's it. So Tasha have it, and she also asked friends to help her. And this is the power of you working together and having the network, and then you have the resources, and you're able to put it in dito sa mga communities na ito that needs engagement. And then we do not call them, ano nga ba, dati sa NGO world, may tawag sa kanila. Pero ngayon, we call them stakeholders. Diba? We do not call them beggars, we do not call them, ano tawag doon? Yung mga peasants, no? Hindi, they're really stakeholders. And this is what you're doing, is really engaging them and believing in them. I mean, believing in them and putting faith in their hearts to believe in themselves. Diba? So, it's an admirable thing. Now, puntahan na natin yung next question, which will be about your work. But before that, you were able to create your thesis because you went to university. Now, I'm sorry to say this is really something that might make people mad, but people like you, for example, this is like stereotyping, would want to be in Ateneo, diba? Would want to be in perhaps in what's that school in Makati, in Taguig, or Andaran, diba? But you chose to be in UP, my school, our school, di ba? Bakit ka nag-UP and anong kursong kinuha mo and what happened there?
Well, actually, it's really funny because when I was in high school, I always thought I'd never be able to get into UP because again, I am so bad at speaking Tagalog, and I
Yeah.
also have my type of education to feel sorry for because I feel like that was one of the barriers really, and because of me wanting to advocate for culture, talk about it, and yet I
And
did
then
not.
here you are, you speak in English.
Yeah, exactly. That's why. And even with my thesis, for example, it is on cultural mapping, but it was a struggle for me to really learn about all these other different languages that we have. So I think what made me want to go to UP really was because there's this thing I'm missing, that it was hard for me because I felt like I was always in a bubble most of my life, which I always acknowledge. Like there is really a level of blessings and privilege that I've had, but parang I wanted to use it really to be able to expand also beyond it and not just stay inside it. So when I had the opportunity then of going abroad, I actually got into the school I really wanted to. But when I realized the work that I was doing, what was missing wasn't something I could learn anywhere else but here. I ended up taking the
Mm.
talent test because I knew I wouldn't be able to pass UFCAT. Because I'm
Oh,
also
come
not good at
on.
math. I'm not
Yeah,
very
yeah.
I'm not very studious actually. Like I wasn't one talaga who liked school. So I think that's why I had Kids for Kids and all these other avenues. So I think when I took the talent test and I was able to get in UP Fine Arts, I took visual communication. I
Yeah.
decided that other than really, of course, learning from the university, but also learning from I guess the people in it. I think what was exciting then was I remember, well, one of the most pressuring things one of my profs told us on like the first day was because a lot of people were like cutting class that day and parang only a few of us came to class, and he told us to remember that the ones paying for our education are the people that we see walking in the street. So parang he
Wow.
really opened our eyes to say that the reason why you're here is because of them, and it is only right that you come here to help them afterwards. So that super stuck to me, and that made me really, of course, realize why. And it was a good idea. I decided to go to UP because I would not get that experience anywhere else. And there, of course, is like the stereotype of like UP students being activists, all these other things. And especially since I was advocating for like children's rights and environment, um, obviously there were a lot of things that would come up, but in the end I think what I loved talaga was learning from my blockmates, like the people around me, because of how different they were when they came to
Yes.
looking at life, and how each one was all different. For example, even if I, of course, my majors, I had the same blockmates all the time, so I knew a lot of them very well. But even when I take my GEs, you meet all types of people no matter what class you take. So I think that's what I enjoyed, because I wouldn't get that experience anywhere else, I guess.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
true.
think,
I
yeah,
agree.
and I think what was really nice is then also getting to meet people that have very different backgrounds, or parang their walks of life are very different, but you see how excellent they are. Parang it made me realize talaga how galing Filipinos are if we're just given the platform to be able to be galing. So that's why I enjoyed UP also, because we were all parang everyone was put in the same playing field, which I enjoyed. And even if I struggled at speaking Tagalog, like that really, or Filipino, it really helped me, I guess, kind of like find a way to be able to connect with people even with a language barrier, which honestly is very difficult to break. Like when we used to do different outreach work before in high school, normally it would just be me and a few other people interacting with the community. So that was another barrier we had to break. It's parang these kids that have the ability to give back yet don't know how to connect with people that need it the most. So that was kind of the barrier that I wanted to break, and what I learned to break throughout my childhood and throughout going to UP. But yes, I took visual communication because I was very interested in seeing how I could use art for change, and seeing how you could actually get people to listen if things look nice. Simplest way to put it, I guess. So
You have memorable teachers in UP?
yes, I have. Well, I was so happy I was able to meet one of them because half of my classes sadly were pandemic classes. So my third and fourth year we're all online. But I was able to meet one of my favorite profs. Her name's Tina Colaiko. So she's the head of the Met. So I finally met her and I told her how much I loved her class because it was about design theory, and that's what made me realize that I'm actually very much interested in also the theory side or the more historical side of the art world
Wow.
as well. So I loved her class talaga. There was one class I never cut. I also loved one of my professors, Ma'am Tepay. She was our prof for techniques. So I went into fine arts, of course, because I'd take art classes with my mom, but these were very informal. None of them were ever like, sketching and very formal traditional art. So it was really a first time for everything when I went to UP. And one of our first plates was to do a charcoal portrait. And I've never drawn a portrait or used charcoal my whole life, but I was able to do it because of like professors like Ma'am Tapay that were very very exciting to learn from. They didn't make it feel like talaga you were in class. So I think that's the best part about UP din is you have professors that don't make it feel like you're inside a university. So yeah.
That's true. That's true. We try to do that kasi our good teachers are like that. Eh. So,
Yeah.
I also teach in UP now, broadcast communication. So, sayang hindi kita naging estudyante. But we're still met. So, I'm thankful to God for that now. So, fine arts and then parang cultural mapping. It's really more, say, anthropology or sociology or Philippine studies. Pero fine arts and, cultural mapping, what happened there? How did you do it?
Um, it was actually how I learned about cultural mapping is because I currently actually do a little bit of work. Well, through Tayo Change Agency, we do work now for Kong Toff de Venecia. So he was the one who wrote the creative industries bill. And when we were helping him with his social media, I had to read all the different hearings. So like 6 hour long hearings, and I was reading all the different things that they had. And there was a whole hearing on culture, the state of our heritage, and this new key term, cultural mapping. And I read about it, and then I ended up researching a bit on it. And
What is that Pokemon then? As we want to answer in this show, what is the Pokemon?
so I didn't exactly know it was a formal process. I think that was the first time I heard about it when I was like as a technical term, but the idea really of I guess the concept when I read about it I kind of grasped it right away just because it was something actually sort of low key that my lolo was doing somehow. Whenever he would design something, he would look back at the history of the people, what they were going through, their struggles, of course, even down to the food that they would eat. He always talked about designing through the five senses. So even when you smell the space, it should remind you of a certain place. And then my Lola, we actually called her Mitch. Her name's Denise, but we call her Mitch. And she took up history actually when she was in college. So she was one who'd always make me kwento about her childhood, about the way she grew up, all these different things from the past. And I think that's what made me realize how much I loved hearing her stories. So since we live with her now, I was just talking to her every day. And because of her everyday conversations and all the different stories she tell me, even about her grandparents and her parents, I realized there was no way I could actually how could I actually use all this knowledge she's giving me and use it for something more exciting. So that's when I started looking into cultural mapping or this idea of basically mapping culture. But it's a formal term pala because when I was talking to my advisor about it, he actually didn't want me to do my thesis on cultural mapping because he said
Talaga.
it was hard. And he actually was part of the team that mapped in UP Diliman, I believe. So he wasn't the man discouraging, but he was really telling me it's a difficult topic to discuss, especially because you're going to be dealing with technicalities, LGUs, and all these different existing toolkits or existing formats you'll need to follow to actually execute cultural mapping. But
And then, which course you will tell your prof, dealing with LGUs? I can do that. What I'm doing already, sir.
So obviously, like, I
Termo.
got nervous, like, because again, like, I super wanted to do well. So I got so scared. I was like, oh my God. So obviously, I usually, like, I overcompensated. So I ended up actually signing up for a class on cultural mapping because I wanted to make sure I understood the process well enough. So I did, and I ended up getting like a certificate pa after that. It was like for 4 weekends, for entire Saturdays. So that's when I realized it's so mabigat. It's so heavy. No one's gonna read, like, I'm so sorry, NCCA, but like, no one's gonna read the 250-page handbook that they're giving out. Like, when I was talking to the mayor of Del Carmen and I asked if he ever was interested in cultural mapping, he said, the problem is they don't have people to do it. And even if they want to, there's no budget for it. And even if they apply for a grant, there are too many other things that need grants before that.
Right.
So as much as they would want to, it's just so hard to actually do the official process of doing it. So that kind of like sparked an idea in my head of why not create a way to unofficially cultural map or try heritage mapping, because my prof said I couldn't call it cultural mapping. I had to call it a different word because cultural mapping is technical.
So what did you call it?
I called it heritage mapping, but what I
Yeah,
did
it's like
was
the same, you know.
is I took inspiration, of course, from the cultural mapping process. I looked at all the different forms people would have to fill up, and then I created a booklet instead that translated it into a very simple way for young people to digest. Because
Oh.
if there are ways that we could actually utilize the good that can come out of cultural mapping, even if it isn't the official process, there isn't anything wrong naman with doing it, especially if it's
Exactly.
your own culture.
Right.
So
Ang
that's
galing nun, that actually people can start mapping. But also, hopefully, you put in the process in your thesis, publicizing.
yes.
Kasi, I mean, what's the point of putting it in a drawer, di ba? If you map it. Like, is cultural mapping, are you making maps? Are you map makers? Are you cartographers?
I'm super not one, but I feel like that's what's funny is when every time people ask, like, I did a survey, an initial survey, I released it to like, I think I was able to get 100 young people from UP, out of UP, anywhere to like just fill it up. And it was really funny is the first question was, have you ever heard about cultural mapping? I think 70% said no. And then you had to describe it in your own terms.
Right?
And
That it's not
everyone,
about maps.
yeah.
It's not
And
cartography, right?
exactly. And so many people were confused. They were really like making maps about culture. That was always the most said description,
No.
which makes sense. I mean, parang if you first hear about it, people would initially think that, but in reality, it's not. It's actually
So
not.
basically, pag sinabi mong cultural mapping, dino-document mo lang yung isang bagay na itinuturing na mahalaga sa isang community. No? For example, pwede yung tao, di ba? Pwede
Yeah.
yung monumento, pwede yung puno, di ba? Ang cooperative word, padaliin nga natin, ano? Kasaysayan ay mula sa salitang saysay. Ano ba yung may saysay sa lipunan na yon, di ba, girl? You have a presentation?
Oh, yeah, I do. I can.
You want to show it?
I can show. Yeah.
Please.
So yeah. So this is actually
Teacher, we want to learn.
these are portions of my thesis defense.
Please.
Because I actually
Defend it to the public now.
I had
To
to
the
defend
Filipino
it
people.
twice. So in fine arts, just for background, with our courses, we have to defend twice. The first is we have to write a paper. And our parang prompt was what gives you anxiety in this world. And for me, mine was loss of appreciation for heritage. Because growing up, of course, I was surrounded by cuentos about it. But when I talked to other people about it, everyone was very caught up in the now that no one really realized the value for past, and very timely with the whole re-elections and everything just happening again. So I wanted to see how visual design or visual communication, which is my course, could inspire intergenerational conservation of heritage. So meaning, how can the idea of different generations talking to one another actually conserve heritage or regenerate it amongst young people? So the whole idea was really to, for example, because in my course it's really around the idea of the arts or designing visual communication. I wanted to show how we could design the Philippines that we dreamed of, and at the same time cultivate our community and regenerate our culture. So going back to the idea of what does the youth relate to the most when it comes to heritage? Because if you ask young people,
Tasha, I'm sorry. I think you're sharing a screen, but it's not yet appearing. Can you share again?
okay, I'll share again.
Yeah. It's just black.
Let me reshare.
I hope it, why Natasha Tanjutco has started screen sharing and I still haven't seen it. Nakikita mo ba? Sagot ka sa chat, ma'am, nakikita mo ba? Nawala rin yung sa ko, teka lang Vibal Group. I just have to see. Kasi black lang sa akin eh. It's just black. Yeah, it's all black daw. Yeah. Hala, sayang kanina pwede.
Yeah. Well, to just share what it was just really seeing how you could actually design a way, well, using my course since it's visual communication, design a way to allow different people to talk about heritage in a very casual way, but at the same time, of course, make
Okay.
sure that it conserves it.
I'll show you something, I'll probably put it here. May pinadala ako kay, black nga lang, may message lahat, no? NCCA. Taka lang I want to show this kasi. I hope it's here. Wait lang Nasaan na si Tasha? Tasha Tanjutco. I want to show the NCCA form Remember what I sent you?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. I wanted to show you that para lang makita ng tao what is a cultural mapping. So they have a toolkit and you referred to this and sabi mo you're sorry to say that parang if kung wala siyang seminar, parang hindi siya magigets masyado. Not because people are stupid, but because it's really parang complicated. Di ba?
Yes.
So hindi naman ito parang niyayari nating NCCA, no? Pero this is a very alam mo naman lab natin ng NCCA, but this is a very constructive thing, no? This is a toolkit and then you have actually may illustrations naman, may paliwanag naman. Ito, are you referring to this toolkit, madam, the 300-page thing?
Yes.
So yung form ang hanapin natin so you have all these instructions. And sinasabi mo parang masyadong technical. And yun din yung problem with a lot of cultural workers is masyadong technical. Talaga. So, baka yung forms nandito. Yeah. There you go. So, may mga forms.
Yes.
So, what is so merong parang name of the heritage. If it's a natural heritage, there are various kinds of heritage. And then you have a photo. And then ano ba yan? Vulkan ba yan? And then you have the location, area, description, stories associated with it, significance, how is it conserved, etc., etc. Now, if you're going to look at this form, if you have a scholar, then you do a book. Di ba? Like Mr. Galban. Basically, ganun din yung ginawa niya dito Pero ginawa niya paragraph form. You see here, you have a form which is filed by the local government, by dun sa mga tinatawag na cultural mappers. It's not actually a map. It's actually a form where you put the important information, very short, about a very important place. Siguro kailan siya tinayo, bakit siya mahalaga, and all of that. Now, how do you make that simple? Miss?
Well,
nagtataas na ng kilay sa'yo yung mga cultural mapper ng NCCA na makilala ko yan, yung mga mayroon ng cultural mapping dyan. Ako, nagot ka, girl.
well, what I did was because, of course, cultural mapping is a technical process talaga. Like, especially when you're working with communities and especially if you're mapping indigenous communities, there are a lot of ethical factors you'll have to look at din. So,
I'm not saying mali ang ginagawa nila. If you can do it like that, you do it. Diba?
yes.
Pero, what if hindi nga namin kaya yung ganun ka-technical? Diba? So, sige, that's where Tasha's concept comes in. Sige.
I'll try to share screen one more
Yes,
time.
you can make it. There you go.
There,
Fantastic.
yeah. Okay. So there. So what I ended up doing was, because what I wanted, of course, my target audience was youth. So how exactly would you, what does the youth relate to the most when it comes to natural and cultural heritage? Because if you ask young people, what do you like about our culture, or what do you like about natural heritage, they'll really be confused about what exactly you're talking about, because this is not exactly terms that were taught in school to remember. So what I did to be able to simplify it, of course, was first I had to understand what cultural mapping was and what were the available tools or media that anyone, the public, could use. So what I noticed was that the one
Sorry, sorry, Tasha. Can you, anong tawag doon? Can you make it big? Hindi, ano? Ito full screen, yes. There you go.
there.
Thank you.
Okay. So what I realized was the majority of the tools available were for professionals. There weren't any for the general public to be able to, I guess, digest, because of obviously majority of the processes need to be done with big institutions. So how can you scale it down? So that's why I did like different surveys. I interviewed other young people, and I also interviewed practitioners. So I had the honor of also interviewing Prof. June De Leon, Joe Ayala, Miss Ria from NCCA also. So I did get different perspectives of different people, to really understand what the essence of cultural mapping was, or their idea of culture, and how it could be quote unquote mapped in a simpler form. So then one of the nicest lessons that I learned from Prof. June De Leon was how young people are walking cultural maps of our current present. So if you're able to get young, and he kept saying this, if you're able to get young people to actually get interested in cultural mapping or the idea of mapping their own heritage, then you will be able to automatically regenerate it for the next generations. So how I ended up doing this was, there's a lot of terms, but there. So what I did was I ended up, of course, getting inspired by his idea of Filipino core culture, or the idea that first, of course, we're highly expressive. We love the idea of talking, of performing, and that we're also highly relative. So we love relating, whether it be meeting a new person. We never just ask for someone's name or their age, but we'll ask so many questions up until we find a connection with them. And then, of course, we're highly participatory. So that's why we have terms like saling pusa, why even our hosts in TV shows are always counterpart, male and female, why there are all these different things within our culture that instead of looking at linear processes, we like things circular. So all these different notions of core culture, I simplified it down into the idea of media, or the idea of photography, film, visual media, nature, so the environment around us, and of course, food, because that was the easiest way to actually make young people understand how culture can be also both intangible and tangible. Because the idea of food, of course, in the process of making food, that's intangible, but what comes out is something tangible. So there, after doing all these different types of research, and of course looking at the current cultural mapping toolkit, I ended up coming up with this booklet called Kwentuhan Tayo. So it was this idea that you could cultural map or heritage map through kwento. And what made me start this, of course, was because right now, since we're living in what the UN likes to call a triple planetary crisis, or there's climate change, there's biodiversity loss, there's pollution, all of this also is seen in our own crisis of doubting the Filipino. Can we even get through this? What is left exciting about our country if we're constantly doubting ourselves? So since our archipelago is so diverse, yet there's so few voices represented, in which I learned throughout the work I was doing when I was younger. And normally when we talk about culture, it's seen as a top-down approach, or for example, institutions like museums, that's the only place you can find culture, or cultured people are only if you're educated. And the idea that LGU or NCCA would have to be the institutions to drive cultural mapping. How could we liberate the process for young people? So this toolkit, it's a movement of cultural exploration through our five senses. So what I did was understand how you could actually quote unquote map or understand our culture by approaching it through the five senses. So I learned that I got inspired by my anthroprof actually in UP, Gideon Lasco. He taught us our entire anthro class based on the five senses of the Filipino. So I was super inspired by that and applied it to my thesis to see how culture and creativity could be a soft power for change. So what it is basically I developed this toolkit. Um, it's called the Kwentuhan Kit. And then, of course, in a way, how we could publish what would come from the Kwentuhan Kit to make a Kwentuhan Club or a public heritage depository.
I love it. It's public history. It's already the complete package. So you document and hindi na lang yan dapat mabulok lang. A lot of the I'm sorry to say this, may cultural mapping na nangyari. Pero hindi naman, alam mo, kailangan mo hingin sa mayor, kailangan mo hingin sa mga tourism officers, tinatago. Hindi man tinatago. Nakatago syempre. Diba? Pero, what if you just put it out? Diba? So that it will become relevant to people. Diba? Para i-own. Kasi when you put it out and you make people know about these things, they own it. They own already. No? Ako, shout out kay Senator Loren Legarda na talaga naman sumusuporta dito sa cultural mapping na ito, no? But thank you so much Senator Loren. No? Mapakinggan niyo to, napakaganda nitong kwentuhan toolkit ni Tasha, no? Sige, tuloy mo, girl.
So yes, those were my two outputs. And of course, I got inspired by cultural mapping. So that's what the toolkit is supposed to be. And then also the idea of photo voice methods. So how normally you can actually have people document their own processes. Or record their own voice doing it. So what I did just for the sake of course, since my course is visual communication, it also had to appeal to design.
Yeah, it
So,
has to alam mo tawag dito yung for requirement, di ba? For
yes,
anong tawag nila doon? May tawag sila doon yung for compliance.
compliance.
Kailangan visual arts di ba? So you have to put a visual theory in it, di ba? Sige.
Yes. So everything I did actually, I hand illustrated all of this. So the whole booklet is around 250 pages. And I didn't
Well, that's
have
only 100 pages short than the NCCA.
yes. So that was also parang when I finished it, I was like, oh gosh, it's that long. But the reason why it was long was because the way I actually formatted the pages wasn't like a textbook. So I'll show sample pages here. So
There you put photos and visuals and all of that.
so I made sure that even the text size was large, so you don't get you don't get lazy to read. So the whole toolkit
You know,
itself,
even if it's short, I'll still be lazy to read it. I'm joking.
That's me also because I'm actually one that I liked history and I love learning about their culture, but I didn't like reading a lot when I was younger. So that's why I guess I took visual communication then, because the whole challenge is getting people to understand things you actually wouldn't want to read. So I had to, of course, divide it into chapters.
Ganda.
So because
Ganda, girl.
thank you, because normally if you're mapping when you're mapping and like when you're doing cultural mapping through NCCA, you will have to look at whether it's tangible, intangible, whether it's a national artist or a person of importance. So there's specific categories, but what I did instead was made my own based off what exactly people relate to the most when you think about culture. So it's kalikasan or the environment around you, kain, so of course the food, anything that we eat or grow, and then kapwa, so our family, our community, the people around us. So each chapter presents interesting either short stories or studies correlated to that portion. So for example, kalikasan, I did like interviews with Masumi, different people. For example, my Tita Patty, she is a curator. So she released this book on the universal principles of like the traditional arts. So it sounds so heavy, but I simplified it. So all these different big, I guess, names and their different theories simplified down so that people could digest it. And then in the meat of it, after you can read all these different things, it's not exactly necessary to read like all the different things that are within the chapters, but if you want to get a little bit inspired on how to what exactly to map, that's supposed to be parang like the preamble. And then the mismong activity itself is the activity pages. So it's a little bit small, you won't be able to read it, but I took some of the categories in the official cultural mapping forms, and then I put it into a different format so that it's easier to understand. So it's divided parang into like the senses. So seeing, what you see in the place, like if it's food specifically, what do you smell? So there, and then there's like also ways you could of course write your own story, so it's a little less stiff as compared to the official way of doing cultural mapping. And then in the end of every chapter,
So
there's
there's a real map now.
yeah. So in the end of every chapter, for example, for the first one, since it's kalikasan, how can you actually create a heritage map of the different areas you can visit around your home that I guess correlate to a certain story that relates to you or your family or your community. So for example, for the chapter based on food or kain, of course, introducing the five senses, and then they could map, of course, their own recipes. So in the end, the parang output is creating your own heritage cookbook. So each chapter presents a creative way of, I guess, transferring knowledge or transferring cultural knowledge.
Kasi
And of
just to
course,
clarify, lahat naman nito, nandun na sa NCCA toolkit, di ba? Culinary, di ba? Pero yan, you just make it a little bit more personal.
yes. So the way NCCA categorizes it is based lang on whether it's material culture and then intangible. And then I think people normally, if it's people that are significant, it's normally national artists. And then nature, so natural heritage. So those are the divisions. But then since if you present people with that, it's hard to connect. I just simplified it into different other categories instead, so that it's easier for people to understand. And then the last one is kapwa. So this is basically, I guess, all about community, your family, individuals. So of course, there's even like a small page where you can do your own family tree. And then the activity in the end is your own heritage book about your family. So the reason why I wanted to do this was because of all the cuentos I'd hear growing up, and I never had a one place to put it all. And I wanted to make sure that, of course, later on, even if people can't hear it firsthand from my grandparents, that there's a place they can look at it in, basically, and create some sort of informal archive of knowledge of my story that I kind of learned about through other people within my family. So
Right.
I think that was one driving factor to why I think when I was presenting my thesis, a lot of the people that heard about it really liked it, because there was never this one space where you could actually see an archive of family stories, because normally when we're taught about history, it's in the large scale of things,
Correct.
especially in school, it's very traditional. But in this idea of scaling it down, you get people more excited. For example, during the EDSA revolution, it's more exciting to hear about the frontline stories of the people who, when, where they came from, rather than the dates and the significant events. If you talk about it in a more personal way, then you get people to listen. So that's why in the parang end of the booklet itself, it presents this idea of creating a fiesta, or fiesta of the five senses, wherein you could basically execute different creative projects inspired by, of course, the heritage that you just mapped or the culture you just mapped. And then, of course, because it's supposed to be a visual communication solution, then after you do these forms, you could digitalize it and then put it in the heritage depository, which is like an online website that people can have access to. So for example, if your family comes from Cagayan, you can also see all the other people from Cagayan who are sharing their own stories. Or if you're from Manila, who are the other people that are also sharing stories about this certain event. So it becomes an exchange talaga of stories. And then later on, what I hope to do really is develop versions for a variety of target audiences. So
Yan,
balik
yan.
is
That's my question eh. Kasi parang the way I'm sensing it, the target audience is not it's not a lumad kid who wants to do it on his own, or a local kid from somewhere. Parang palagay ko mas educated middle class people
yes.
na parang mas millennial and Gen Z, ano? What do you think?
Yes.
Because that's where you're coming from, di ba? Ano ka eh, Gen Z ka eh, di ba?
Yes. So that was the initial target audience, was seeing, of course, how I could have my classmate do it. So parang that was my initial, if I could get them to be interested in that, then now I can break it down further into how I could get other people interested in it. So first, since that was my most familiar target audience, it was the youth around me. That was my immediate target audience for
Right.
listening to this. But then eventually, my dream talaga is to develop it later on for, of course, kids, grassroots communities, and then also translate it, because I feel like majority of the material, especially if it's technical, like the toolkit, it's in English, and majority of the stories aren't. So how do you bridge this gap then? So hopefully, if I'm able to develop this further, I can simplify it down. But
Well, it's
I
something
actually,
that you can problematize later, no?
yeah.
And by the way, Chavisan Velasquez says it is informative. Also, the layout and details are so good. Brilliant work, sabi ni Arlene Cortez. No? Wow, nice idea, sabi rin ni Arlene Cortez. June and Day sa Diwa, she said, I underwent 5 days, October 18 to 2021 of cultural mapping training sponsored by Bataan State University and NCCA and Batangas. And it's not really as easy as it looks like. Junan, mukhang ikaw ang require ng mga estudyante mong panoorin to ngayon. Ha? Maraming salamat, Junan. Ha? Brian Ferrer is watching. Para lang magpahinga ka ng konti. Ano? Nakita nyo naman, ano? So, thank you so much. Salamat din sa panonood kay, sino ba ito? Si Purificacion Pagiligan. Yes, thank you so much. No, so, continue. Pero yun na nga, no? The audience is, some other time, you can do it. Di ba? And you can actually ask help from someone who actually can do it for you. Di ba? I mean, for you, ano naman yan eh, yung kumbaga, hopefully it would be sustainable. What I want to ask now before you continue, and I think nakita ko yung mother of pearl ng ano mo, no? Kala ko yan yung nasa likod mo eh, yung mother of pearl na baul eh, na kaban. Tanong, do you have already this kit? Like it's not a concept. You already have it.
Yeah.
How do you plan to put it out? Like are you looking for a publisher for it? You will sell it? What's the business plan for this toolkit?
Originally, I didn't really have one, but then I wanted to see first if people would actually like it, or the general public. So I posted it on social media, and there were people asking actually if they could order it. So I got excited. So
So
hopefully,
you posted it, but you did not put the PDF yet,
no,
the whole thing.
not
So you
yet.
just
Not
posted
the
it. I'm interested. Some people say, so how do you answer their inquiries?
So hopefully within, I think, the next month, I will try to proofread it first, because I realized that I was rushing to do my thesis. Actually,
Definitely.
finished this booklet. Yeah, I
Yes.
finished this I did this in like the actual booklet, like putting it together. I did it in 3 weeks. So I still need time to redigest the information, and then
Right.
afterwards, I hope to publish it, to make it accessible, because I feel like as educators could also use it as well. Because, for example, we actually sort of tested it with one of the communities we're working with in Halian. We have a coordinator, his name's Richmond, and he actually works for Teach for the Philippines. So we wanted to test out how we could actually use some of the parts of this booklet and apply it to a workshop with young people. So we
Now,
actually did.
cultural workers like Tasha, with your NGO, you know how to get funding. Eh? So you know how to request with people, di ba, the forms that you have to fill out, no? And I think NCCA, if they will not be mad at you, I'm joking, of course, no? You can propose with them, eh? if they can, if there is a grant, di ba? May mga grant yan na sa cultural mapping, I'm sure they will be interested. Again, nakikita ko to hindi bilang isang competition with NCCA. I think the NCCA toolkit still stands.
Yes.
After seeing the presentation, it will still stand, because you still need the technical things to
Exactly.
do it. But if you can do cultural mapping with others who are more, at least visual people, I think it can be a complementary thing.
Yes.
What's your vision for this? Do you see this as income generating? Like you sell copies of this and you will profit, or what's ano ang nakikita mo dito, or you want to give it for free? How do you do it?
I think eventually, like, the goal is to make it 1-for-1. So, for example, if someone will buy the actual booklet, it will help sponsor or fund communities that won't be able to have booklets like this, which is why translating it or transforming and creating simpler versions for frontline communities is kind of like the next step, so that the model becomes those that have the means to be able to purchase these booklets to map their own families, or whether it be their own personal projects, will in the end also, I guess, assist or make possible other types of projects for other communities. And you're super correct when you mentioned that it is a support to the existing cultural mapping, because of course, like I mentioned, cultural mapping really is a set process talaga. But if you don't have the means to get into it right away, this can be a simplified version to test the waters, bale. And then if you feel like you really need to get into the meat of things, really understand, of course, the technicalities behind translating material culture or intangible culture into either tourism opportunities or income or livelihood opportunities, then of course there's the official way to do the cultural mapping.
We want to teach people here na hindi ko mo gumawa si Tasha dito ng something and then ipamigay na lang na libre. You know, if you can, sure, pero we want to be sustainable. She put effort in this. She's an artist. Well, even if she have the means, hindi naman ibig sabihin din naman na, di ba, na it would not be sustainable for her. So may business model siyang tinitingnan dito na if someone buys one, then someone else gets a free one, which is very good, no? So kasi kailangan the cultural workers should stop thinking of what they're doing as something na parang worthless. When you pay something, it has worth. When you do something like this, it's kung maganda yan, parang national artist Mañosa. People are always questioning the cauldron. Bakit daw mahal? Ang hindi nyo naiintindihan doon, yung ilalim na bakal doon, mas mahal yun. Dahil yung ilalim na, aside from the design, the ilalim na bakal has to support it para hindi yan mahulog. People are always asking about monuments. Why are they so expensive? Putya, hindi naman yung bakal lang na nakikita nyo sa itaas ang monument. The monument is the base, which is even heavier than the monument itself. The base below it should support the monument so that it will not fall when a storm comes or whatever, earthquake, whatever, di ba? So, and the cost of culture, it's always like question. Bakit mahal ang project ang ano dito? No! That's not how it works. Diba? Kailangan pinapahalagaan natin yung kultura. Kailangan binabayaran natin yung mga cultural workers natin when they do work. Yung graphic artist natin, hindi libre ang mga trabaho niyan. Diba? So, siyempre natuwa lang ako na libre yung interview natin kay Tasha. I'll try to make up with her siguro with merienda or what, no? Na nakiusap naman ako sa kanya. But seriously, when we have, kasi interview naman ito but when we have work to do with them, speaking engagements and all of that, kailangan meron naman konti. Diba? If kaya mo namang i-compensate, why not? At kung hindi ka mo naman kaya, be forthright na wala akong honorarium to, kung okay lang po, no? Or whatever, no? But again, we need to put value to the culture that we create. Diba? So thank you, Tasha, for that. Now, time check lang because papatayin daw ako ng ilaw at 9 o'clock. So wala namang masyadong tanong, but please continue the presentation. Maging conscious lang tayo that maybe we're going to receive questions by 8:50. Sige.
So actually, it's the last few slides lang that just highlight the designs that I ended up doing for the actual toolkit itself. So I, of course, took inspiration from a lot of different visual media and archives of the past. So luckily, because of the different classes I had for design theory and art history, I was able, and also books that I was able to receive from my Lola. I looked a lot at the different design inspiration. So these are some of the illustrations I had to do for the book. And then also tried doing traditional media because again my course is fine arts. So I had to of course exemplify then what I learned. And then also use mixed media, so see how you could make something of the past look exciting in the present. And then even the logo development, everything had to come together in a very cohesive manner. So even the symbol, how I came up with this stylized letter K was I illustrated it many times manually until I digitalized it, just because I felt like the idea of this whole project was to be very hands-on. So majority of the art you really see online now, or majority of the graphic designs that we see, always start from digital. But what I wanted to do was to start really manual, to continue,
Wow.
I guess, connecting the idea of like traditional and digital. So majority of the illustrations talaga, like for example these and this one is all hand, and then I just scanned it and to digitalize it. So
Jesus Christ. I'm
yeah.
sorry I said the name of the Lord in vain, but really, look at this. This
Thank
is a lot of work. You know, little Philippine map there that you did not probably notice with the eye and all of that. Jesus. I mean, I'm sorry, I said the name of the Lord in vain. Oh, you're amazing, man. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Oh.
So there, that's the end of my presentation.
The question is, of course, I just like to put some comments here. Sana ba to? Meron akong maganda, meron daw may gusto magpa-shoutout there. Sabi ni Robert Musa, nakaka-relate ako sa topic na cultural mapping. For example, sa Dumagat Remontado tribe in Tanay Rizal, it's actually teachers who do it. Mostly our session is watched by teachers. And most of the people who do cultural mapping in the municipalities are teachers. So, salamat, no? Marami kami natutuhan ngayon. Nakaka-relate daw siya kasi daw sa tribe sa Dumagat Remontado tribe in Tanay Rizal, meron silang sagradong lugar or tahanan ni God kung saan doon sila nagdarasal sa Makidepat or Panginoon. Tahanan ni God, very Tasha. Di ba? It's like so galing. Grabe, no? Hindi kita minamak. Gusto ko lang light lang tayo dito. Pero hindi, salamat Tasha. No, kasi dito mo pinapatunayan sa amin na hindi mo naman kailangan talaga na, I mean, yes, you need to speak your language, yes. And she's trying. Tasha is trying. Pero hindi naman kailangan na sobrang galing mo. 'Di ba? Para mag-immerse ka sa culture. 'Di ba? Ang ganda. So, ano ba to? Meron pa nag-ano sa akin eh. Katiensa. Teka lang ha. O basta may nagpapa-shoutout, pasensya ka na nawala yung pangalan mo. So, sorry kung hindi kita makita ngayon. Pero, Tasha, ito yung tanong namin ng girlfriend ko eh. Quo vadis? Ibig sabihin ng quo vadis in Latin, saan ka ngayon patungo? You just graduated. You had this cultural mapping thing. Are you working now? What's your plan?
So I kind of do work through Tayo. So that's right now. I guess since I just graduated.
Second NGO, it's an organization now with a SEC, and do you make pasweldo people, you know?
So Kids for Kids is our NGO. That is the one that does our like org work. That's our manpower mainly. But Tayo itself became its separate SEC registered like for profit then. So what we do is Tayo ends up becoming the way we make our Kids for Kids project sustainable. And we do get, for example, paid by clients to do different work correlated to the ideas of course, like inspiring the youth, involving them in creating impact work. but really the idea of looking at how you can bridge culture and creativity and use it as a soft power for sustainable development. So that's what Tayo does. So we do have, like, we work with Doc De Venecia for Achieve, his arts and culture and creative industries block. We worked with PLDT and Smart recently. We hosted their sustainability week, so we were able to give a talk on culture and climate to 300 employees. So we do.
Okay, you're also an advocate for climate justice.
Yes, I do a lot of work in the climate field. I was actually able to attend the UN conference. I was lucky enough to attend the UN conference last year, COP26. So I delved a lot into climate work. Shy. So yes, I through Kids for Kids, really, that's how our advocacy work really goes. And then through Tayo, that's how we sustain ourselves through design work. So we're not exactly, we call ourselves a change agency because we don't want to align with the idea of fast-paced marketing and advertising, but we want to see how we can actually transform that into something more meaningful and I guess purpose-led. So that's why a lot of the projects that we do center talaga around the idea of advocating for something bigger than what your company normally does. So that's why we're able to sustain then our projects in Kids for Kids. So that's kind of like the work that I do with Tayo. But eventually, like, I've been seeing now that I really like the idea of curating or museum work. So that's why my mom, lucky enough, she's taking me around to all these different events, seeing if that's something that interests me, and hopefully will allow me to see what I actually want to do next year.
Are you interested now? Like, you think you're interested?
Yes. I mean, I am interested in, like, currently I help her now with Musea Pambata. So I helped curate their new outdoor exhibition called Bakuran. So it's going to be like an outdoor urban garden wherein we're integrating different, like, endemic species, different things that I learned in my whole climate to work and applying it to a kids museum. But then hopefully I really want to learn how I can eventually, I guess, do more serious work or professional work in the cultural field eventually. But for now, just testing different things.
Naku, salamat, no? Well, at least, no? Good luck sa journey mo. But I think, so kung the tayo will make you sustainable, then you can, parang yun yung entrepreneur mo, yan na yung work mo talaga. Yeah. Okay. Marites yung aking GF, saan ka daw nag-aral ng high school? Kung okay lang daw sabihin.
I can, but I never, I moved schools twice. I was first in Maria Montessori. I think that's what allowed me to really see the world in a different way because it's non-traditional. So the way even our classrooms are laid out is you're in a table of 4. You get to choose the subjects you want to take. So since before I was very into the sciences, like natural sciences, that's kind of what made me interested in climate and environment. And then for high school, I transferred to Woodrow's.
Woodrow's? Oo nga pala.
Yeah. So
I like Woodrow's. I go there always.
Because that's where I met Prof. He actually gave a talk, and that was the first time I heard you talk ever. And that's what got me interested, of course, in history because
that talk got you interested in history?
Because we were never taught about history in that way. I mean, normally our teachers are very conservative, so that's why it really.
Don't make bola. That's true.
No, it's true. It's true because when we didn't, because of K to 12, you know how it was alanganin at the time. We were the first batch kasi, so they were testing out all the different subjects with us. So we would never have a proper curriculum every year. So I only had and when they took out history, that was sakto also so I only had history until grade 8. Then 9 onwards it was different. One time was economics, the other time was social science, other one was culture. It was all different. So yeah, I really enjoyed your talk. And I think that's what got me interested in, of course, making history exciting and culture exciting.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm glad to meet you again at Via del Galion, and of course now, and the Kidlat Tahimik here, where this is where we met again, just a few steps away from where I am now. So yeah, thank you, Tasha. Thank you. I mean, no, not joking. Thank you for that compliment. Ayan, Charisan Velasquez, shout out niyo po ako. Oo, ayan, Charisin, out na kita, ha? Oh, ayan na. I'm looking at final questions, pero baka hindi na tayo makakuha, no? Kasi Map Urbino, thank you, Vibal. All of you na nag-comment, thank you so much. But, papatayin ako ng ilaw dito because it will automatically just, So, it's 8:53. Siguro the next question would be, for you, and then before I give my final statement for this, do you have anything you want to promote? And then after that, why is it important? Huwag na mamaya ko na yung mamaritasyon, mahal. Mamaya ko na itatanong si Tasha. The last question is, why is it important to map your culture systematically, especially for our teachers?
I think it's because you'll actually get your students interested in also understanding their own personal history. Because I think that's what is exciting about cultural mapping. It's you get to understand it from first person perspective instead of just studying the dates and names, which are as important. But when you get to first, of course, understand, as young people, I think the general question now is really how can we understand our past in a world that's so fast paced. So I think approaching ways such as cultural mapping in a systematic form or even doing it informally, either way, I think just the approach is very necessary for us to I guess make history exciting and fun, because then you get to ask kids what excites them most about being Filipino, and I think that should always be the question to begin with, since that's the reason why a lot of people, I think, forget about loving cultures, because it's always approached by something so technical. But when you approach it in a way that's personal, you get excited and interested. And when you find joy in something, you'll want to share it with other people. So that's hopefully what we have to do with history and culture.
Thank you so much, Tasha. First of all, I have a wish. And this wish is that you are not going to lose your idealism. As you grow old like me, you will get reality checks and all of that. But I do hope that you will not lose your idealism and your love of country. And also, I also wish that if there is any way that I can contribute to the things that you do, if I can give, of course you do not need this, but if I can give also a perspective in the future about it, then I hope that we can continue these conversations. God bless you, Tasha, and I do hope that you update us. We will have another interview when you put this out available for the people after you have made the edits. Okay,
Yes.
Tasha, thank you so much.
Will do. Thank you
Let's
so
have a
much.
photo session after this.
Okay.
I'll just end the show by saying, mga kaibigan, napakinggan po natin ang isang kabataan. At dito nyo makikita ang kapangyarihan ng kabataan. No? Fresh ang pag-iisip, fresh ang ideas. No? Kahit na yung mga matagal ng proseso, pwedeng magbigyan ng kulay, bigyan ng mas madaling paraan. And yan naman yung advocacy din natin sa matagal na panahon, di ba? Mga teachers, kailangan gawin nating mas madaling maintindihan. Ilapit natin sa bayan ang kasaysayan ng ating kultura. At ako naman, bilang isang cultural worker for how many years now? 2 decades perhaps? Parang hindi ako nawawala ng pag-asa. Ang dami-dami nagsasabi, ang hirap mong mahalin Pilipinas. Parang ngayon, sabi ko sa inyo, hindi ko na nafe-feel yan. Bakit? Kasi ang dami-daming kabataan nag-step up na para po ipagpatuloy yung dokumentasyon ng ating kultura. Kaya nga po, tandaan po natin, hindi lahat ng nakaraan ay dapat nating i-record. Totoo yun. Hindi lahat ng bagay ay dapat nating i-preserve. Bakit? Kapag lahat ay i-preserve natin, paano magkakaroon ng pagunlad? Pero may mga bagay na dapat tayong i-preserve. At ano lang ang satanungin natin? May saysay ba ito? Pinapreserve ba natin yan? May saysay ba ito sa bayan? May saysay pa rin ba ito? May maituturo pa rin ba sa atin ito? No? Yun ang operative term. Ano ba ang may saysay? And eto pa, huling-huli, bago tayo matapos, 8:58, ano ba ang magbibigay sa atin ng paraan para makipagkapwa? Yung ginagawa ni Tasha, yung ginagawa ng kasaysayan, yung ginagawa ng kultura, ang gawain ng kultura, ang gawain kultural ay gawain ng pakikipagkapwa-tao. Pag hindi ka nakikipagkapwa-tao, hindi ang gawain kultural, yan ay gawain makasarili. At sana po iwaksi natin ang pagiging makasarili at ang pagsamba sa iilang tao lamang. Sapagkat ang pagpapalaganap ng kultura ay isang gawain ng pag-ibig sa kapwa at sa bayan. Maraming salamat sa pagtuturo sa amin nito, Tasha. Muli, ako po si Xiao Chua, nakita nyo naman, hindi lang po masaya ang kasaysayan, maganda pa at gwapo. Ha? Pero lagi tatandaan, ang kasaysayan ay Kaysaya. Bye-bye!